Carpe diem. The clock is ticking. We use many expressions to camouflage the one certainty of life. It ends with death, and your family and friends are left behind. But wait! I don't want to die. Do you? What if you could suddenly do something about it? What if you had to make extreme sacrifices? Wouldn't you do anything to escape death? If your answer is yes, then you might be a transhumanist. Just like the people in this film.
I think death is very pointless. It doesn't have any particular value. Rather, it's the absence of value, and life is much more interesting.
What are you going to do after your death?
If I happen to die before I manage to upload my mind, which is decently likely, in that case I'm going to hopefully be frozen into liquid nitrogen.
What would be the point of being frozen?
Well, there is a chance of being revived. If you get burned to ashes or worm food, well, none of your information remains. There is no chance whatsoever of getting you back.
So you actually hope to be frozen and then wake up being in a computer?
Yes. That would make me quite happy. My name is Anders Sandberg, and I'm a Swedish computational neuroscientist who've been working at the Future Humanity Institute. I'm thinking about what we can make out of a brain and whether we should be doing it and how to do it. One of my main research interests is whole brain emulation. We can simulate the nerve cells, the signals going on inside them, how one signal goes from one neuron to another, and that way we can learn a lot of interesting things about the brain. But what about making a simulation that encompasses all the nerve cells in the brain, all the little chemical and electric activities that are happening? That might actually become an emulation, something that is so accurate that it is the same thing. So a neural impulse in my brain, that is of course a biochemical process, but we could imagine in a computer a piece of software calculating that now this much energy must move to that area, those areas will have these levels of chemicals change. So all the processes in the real biological brain would have counterparts in the software. They might be very different from what's actually happening in a real brain, but they have exactly the same function. So the idea of the brain scanning would be to start with the brain, fixate it using various chemical techniques, slice it up thinly, scan each of these slices using advanced microscopy, reconstruct in a computer the three-dimensional structure where everything is and what it is, and then use various mathematical methods to turn that into a computer simulation of what would be going on in the brain. I believe that an uploaded person would actually be a person with consciousness, emotions, and we should give them human rights and treat them as real people.
If I were a computer, I would rise from the dead every time. I would never be late. In fact, I would never have to travel, because I'd upload my software to the internet, to be everywhere and nowhere at once. I would never have to eat, because I'd use solar energy. Okay, maybe I would occasionally crash, but for that I would have backups. And of course I wouldn't need to sleep, so I could work all night. Because of the backups, I would be immortal. If I were a computer, I'd still remember the weather on the day I was born. I'd still remember the exact sound of every doorbell of every house I'd ever lived in. I'd still know all the poems I'd ever heard. I wouldn't have any problem learning by heart all cities in the Netherlands. And I would have enough patience for years of experiments to suddenly come up with a great new discovery. Who knows? Maybe I'd even win a prize. If I were a computer, I might program myself so I would never have to feel pain or sorrow. But what are the chances I would live to see that day?
So you have to take time out of your very busy schedule to look at the big picture in the world. And not on your own, but to talk about this. Sort of, what do I think will be interesting to do? What do I need to learn? The level of change that we are going to see in the next 20, 30 years will be literally unlike anything we've ever seen before. So what is happening with knowledge and technology, and therefore also the impact of technology on our world, is that it is not just accelerating, but the acceleration itself is accelerating. It is literally like a rocket or a spaceship taking off. Ik ben Arjen Kamphuis. Sinds eind 2005 heb ik een bedrijf met een partner en wij adviseren andere bedrijven, overheden over de strategische impact van technologie. De verdubbeling van kennis die is op dit moment, geloof ik, 18 maanden wereldwijd. Dus alle wetenschappers en technici bij elkaar, die kunnen nu in 18 maanden evenveel nieuwe kennis produceren als in de alle tijd daarvoor dat we kennis maken.
Alle kennis verdubbelen?
Ja. Dat is op dit moment. En die periode krimpt omdat we ook als mensen steeds betere tools krijgen om kennis te ontwikkelen en betere tools om te communiceren. Het internet is natuurlijk een enorme push om beter en sneller wetenschap te doen.
Dan is er dus nu al niemand die alles kan overzien?
Nee, maar dat tijdperk dat hebben we echt al 2 eeuwen geleden achter ons gelaten. Ja, nu is onze bevolking zo groot dat zonder de geavanceerde technologie van de laatste 20e eeuw kunnen we de huidige wereldbevolking helemaal niet voeden. Dus er is ook geen weg terug meer. Ik bedoel, de enige weg terug met het behoud van quality of life voor de overgrote meerderheid van de wereldbevolking is vooruit in technologie. En dat we dus de technologie doorontwikkelen zonder het ecosysteem te laten crashen, dat is de grote uitdaging, denk ik, voor de 21e eeuw.
I'm Nick Bostrom, professor and director of the Future of Humanity Institute. If you have the view that the eventual creation of machine intelligence, of human level and then perhaps greater than human level machine intelligence, is likely one day to occur, and that it will be a sort of defining event in human history that might shape all future, then it becomes very, very important to try to figure out as much as we can about the different ways in which this could happen. It seems that one can't rule out that over a time scale of 3, 4, 5, 6 decades, something like this could become possible.
The spaghetti code of the brain
So Anders is almost like a walking encyclopedia. Like he reads sort of textbooks on obscure topics as bedtime reading for fun. So he's a really great resource to have in a place like this, because we're only a few people, so we can't have internally one expert on every little thing there is to know.
Our knowledge doubles so fast, everything seems possible. We will suddenly be confronted with choices that are so far-reaching that there is no one yet who can oversee the consequences. Or is there?
Suppose we have a brain emulation. We have a piece of software that does exactly the same work as a real human brain. That human brain is of course going to be a person with skills, knowledge, emotions, at least if it's a successful emulation. And suppose it was a good mathematician or a lawyer or a storyteller. Well, a copy of that brain could do the same work. You could ask the mathematician brain a mathematical problem, and it would be able to solve it as well as the original mathematician. Now, you could imagine, of course, having a lot of copies of brains around, which would allow a lot of problems to be solved.
What would you do if you had copies of yourself?
Wow, I would have a lot of copies because I'm interested in almost everything. And this would be a kind of way of dealing with that. So I would be doing different projects. Different copies would do different projects that I currently don't have time for. The problem I immediately recognize is, of course, that these copies would also come up with ideas. Oh, I want to do that extra project, but I'm just a single copy. Let's make an extra one.
Who are we? What are our limits? What is going to change this century? Most of us are oblivious of any change that might be coming. Or are we in denial?
I am Natasha Vitamora, and I work with the field of human enhancement. I currently live in the United States, although I consider myself a global citizen. It's a very complicated process to consider what it might be like to upload the mind into a different type of system outside the body and outside the housing of the brain. But it's a tremendously wonderful field in that it pushes the limits of what we think we are and what we think we can become. So it's a wide open field of possibilities for not only each individual, but for civilization. I would like to see what the world is like and be part of a species that has pretty much removed death, not as a necessity, but as a conclusion. It's a foregone conclusion. We are going to die. And I think it'd be fascinating to see what it would be like if that foregone conclusion was no longer foregone. There are many different worldviews, many different religious or philosophical belief systems that say, don't tamper with that. Humans are supposed to die. We're supposed to age and grow old and die and make way for the young. That's the process. That's the give and take of the seasons, the changing of the seasons. Well, I don't agree with that at all. I think that's old wives' tale. I think it's a myth. And it's like the myth of flying too high, Icarus, who flew too high to the sun and his wings melted and he fell down to the earth.
Icarus. Yes, that story I've heard before. Together with his father, he tried to escape from an inescapable labyrinth using wings of wax. Of course, he flew too high, and his wings melted. Icarus was gone. I've always been taught that this is an example of hubris, arrogance, a warning that man must keep to his limits. A transhumanist sees it differently.
We humans always aim for things that are beyond our reach, and quite often we succeed. And at that point, nobody calls it hubris. It's when it fails, people say, oh, you were wrong in attempting the impossible. Look at how much you have hurt yourself. But that is always when you fail. Of course, we have to think about how much do I risk by doing this experiment. And quite a lot of experiments are simply too risky to be attempted. So one should always be careful about that. So real hubris might be not thinking about the cost of your experiment. But most of the attempts we do are actually, I think, worth the price. We're not very wise in how we use our technology, or even what we want to develop. We tend to fail first, and then we learn from our lessons. And then we don't do that mistake anymore. Well, at least after the first 10 trials, we maybe learn not to make that mistake.
That's a lovely one.
When was it that you realized that you want to live forever?
I think I must have been about 7 years old or so. And first I just realized I want to know everything. I want to know everything about the universe and what's in it and what's going on. And then I was thinking a bit more and realized that's going to take a long time. So I decided, I better find a way of becoming immortal too. Or at least live as long as I want to. I actually remember exactly what I was doing. I was playing, I think, a kind of hide and seek with a friend. And I was looking at a very cluttered desk, saw a lot of objects on it and realized I'm curious about them. And I want to figure them out. No, I want to figure out the whole apartment. No, the whole world. Not being curious about things, that's a sign that you're either falling asleep or that you're doing something wrong. Usually when you look at something in the right way, you will find something to be curious about. Just why is a pin shaped the way it is? Why are beetles like they are? What is the meaning of these colors? And for that matter, why is space three-dimensional? All these are interesting questions, and the answer to that lead to further interesting questions and possibilities of experiments and manipulations, creating new languages, new universes, and new beetles, perhaps.
Our technology is like a rolling rock that no one can stop. If we were computers, everything would be different. Computers are getting ever more intelligent, and intelligence cannot be controlled. Now, only scholars are thinking about this. When will we start thinking for ourselves? After all, there's only one thing certain in life. The future is coming.
There is this potential that sometime this century, the human condition might completely change. Right now, we exist in only one copy, and that copy is mortal. And if that were to change, that would be such a big thing. We better think about the consequences now. Either we manage to turn ourselves into intelligent machines, or we manage to link ourselves to machines, or we might actually be building software that is smart on its own. And that can be very problematic.
Something that, even if it's fairly far off and low probability, but it has that revolutionary potential, somebody at least should be thinking about it.
We have to merge more with technology. That's a given. We're not going to take out our contact lenses or take off our eyeglasses and throw our cars away. So let's do it responsibly.
Een van de ideeën is ook dat we nu, zeg maar binnen de generatie van de mensen die nu leven, dat we misschien wel wat dat betreft in een soort eindfase zitten. Dat de komende 50 jaar de processen zo snel zullen gaan dat, dat de mens zichzelf dus daarmee gaat overleven.